The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Good morning. Glad to see you made it to the broadcast. Hope you're ready to continue our study in the book Rulers of Evil by F. Tupper Saucy. And I hope that you've been able to find a copy of this book someplace and have managed to secure a copy for yourself. I hope you will read it and understand it and share it with friends and family. We're going to continue now on page 70 of the book where we left off yesterday. We were talking about part of the ways that the Jesuits distract humanity from the Scriptures. And one of those is entertainment, particularly film and television and the media. It says, using cinema and radio to unite Catholic laypersons with the Roman hierarchy was a main purpose of Catholic Action. Catholic Action was inaugurated in 1922 by Pope Pius XI, whose two confessors, Father Aliciardi and Celebrano, were Jesuits. The first pope to install a radio station at the Vatican in 1931 and to establish National Film Review offices 1922, Pope Pius XI ordered Catholics into politics. In the letter Peculiari Quadum, that is, containing the flock, he warned that the men of Catholic Action would fail in their duty if, as opportunities allowed it, they did not try to direct the politics of their province and of their country. The men of Catholic Action did try. Their first major effort was to employ Black Pope Vladimir Ledachowski's strategy of bringing the Catholic nations of Central and Eastern Europe together into a pan-German federation. To head the federation, Ledachowski required a charismatic leader charged with subduing the communistic Soviet Union on the east, Protestant Prussia, Protestant Great Britain, and Republican France on the west. Ledachowski chose the Catholic militarist Adolf Hitler, who told Bishop Bernind of Osnabrück in 1936 that, quote, there was no fundamental difference between National Socialism and the Catholic Church. Had not the Church, he argued, looked on Jews as parasites and shut them in ghettos? I'm only doing, he boasted, what the Church has done for 1,500 years, only more effectively. Being a Catholic himself, he told Berning he admired and wanted to promote Christianity. Hitler's Christianity wasn't Christianity at all. It was Catholicism, Roman Catholicism. And there's a stark difference. In reality, they're diametrically opposed. And if you're a regular listener of Inquisition Update, you'll soon comprehend that if you don't already. Continuing, he says, to promote Christianity as taught him by Roman Catholicism, Adolf Hitler appointed Leni Riefenstahl to create the greatest fascist films ever produced. Her deification of Hitler and romanticization of autocracy in spectacles like Triumph of the Wills are in themselves the history of German cinema in the 30s and early 40s. In print, Ledachowski's Pan-German Manifesto took the form of Hitler's autobiographical Mein Kampf, ghostwritten by the Jesuit Father Stempfel, and placed beside the Bible on the altars of German churches. Roman Catholic churches, no doubt. After World War II, during September of 1957, Pope John XXIII gave Jesuit theater even broader horizons with his encyclical Miranda Prorsus, or Looking Ahead, saying, quote, men must be brought into closer communion with one another. They must become socially minded instead of spiritually minded, I'll just interject. And it says, these technical arts, cinema, sound broadcasting, and television, can achieve this aim far more easily than the printed word. The Catholic Church is keenly desirous that these means be converted to the spreading and advancement of everything that can be truly called good. Embracing, as she does, the whole of human society within the orbit of her divinely appointed mission, she, that is the Roman Catholic Church, is directly concerned with the fostering of civilization among all peoples, unquote. To Catholic film producers and directors, Miranda Prorsus delivered, quote, a paternal injunction not to allow films to be made which are at variance with the faith and Christian moral standards. Should this happen, which God forbid, then it is the bishops to rebuke them and, if necessary, to impose upon them appropriate sanctions. John XXIII urged that Pius XI's National Film Review offices, quote, be entrusted to men who are experienced in cinema, sound broadcasting, and television under the guidance of a priest, specially chosen by the bishops. At the same time, we urge that the faithful, and particularly those who are militant in the cause of Catholic action, that is, Jesuits and their protégés, be suitably instructed so that they may appreciate the need for giving to these offices their willing, united, and effective support, unquote. In 1964, Pope Paul VI amplified Miranda Prorsus with the decree Inter Mirifica, among the wonders, saying, quote, it is the Church's birthright to use and own the press, the cinema, radio, television, and others of like nature. Paul cited, quote, a special responsibility for the proper use of the means of social communication which rests on journalists, writers, actors, designers, producers, exhibitors, distributors, operators, sellers, critics, all those, in a word, who are involved in the making and transmission of communications in any way whatsoever. They have the power to direct mankind along a good path or an evil path by the information they impart and the pressure they exert. It will be for them to regulate the economic, political, and artistic values in a way that will not conflict with the common good, unquote. So do you see the importance of the media, all forms of media, to the Roman Catholic Church to foster Roman Catholic teaching about society and about virtually every realm of our existence. It's often suggested that the Jews control Hollywood, and all of the corruption that comes out of Hollywood, out of the movies and theater, can be attributed to the diabolical Jews. But this book reflects that it is the Vatican that controls the media in all its forms in this country. And I think the closer we look at the media, we will discover that to be true. It says the quality of entertainment's content was decreed in a section of Inter Mirifica, encouraging the chronicling and description or the representation of moral evil, which can, with the help of the means of social communication and with suitable dramatization, lead to a deeper knowledge and analysis of man and to a manifestation of the true and the good in all their splendor. Emboldened by this papal decree, social communicators since 1965 have published the constitutional guarantees of free speech they have pushed the constitutional guarantees of free speech to the limit by chronicling, describing, and representing moral evil with such progressively vivid, repulsive, prurient, yet often appealing detail that entertainment has become, in the opinion of many, a veritable technological how-to of moral evil. It clearly does not lead audience to a deeper appreciation of the Holy Scripture. This fact identifies entertainment today as a successful Jesuit theatrical mission. And I couldn't have said it any better. Not only do the media distract us from the more important things, God's holy word, but it steeps us, it stews us in filth, it pickles us in filth and propaganda and Roman Catholic mind thinking, Roman Catholic mentality, Roman Catholic doctrine, Roman Catholic culture. And I think the absolute best advice for God's people today is shut off the television. Pitch it to the street. Be careful what you read in newspapers. The press in all its forms cannot be trusted. It gives us a totally twisted view of the way we should view the world. God told us how we should live. And He set the course for society, God's people. But that's not our model anymore. The model that we use to establish our societies and our norms in society is through the diabolical press. We see the world through the press's eyes, not through God's eyes anymore. And it's almost impossible for us to distinguish good from evil and evil from good anymore. And I can just testify in my own life. The television that I witnessed as a young child in the 50s, compared to the trash, the pornographical trash that is on family television during prime time, the difference is so stark, raving, absurd that it's incomprehensible that in such a short period of time they could have gotten by with such a transition. And the more I involve myself in research as to what's going on in this country, and through reading the scriptures, I find myself more and more repulsed by a world that is so contrary to the intent that God had that it's disturbing. It's what it is. Anyway, I'll continue with the reading here. It says, during its 4 centuries of existence, the Jesuit educational theatrical enterprise has produced a proud, poised, and imaginative graduate. He or she is enlightened by the Medici library's humanities, facile in worldly matters, moved by theatricality, and indifferent toward the Holy Scriptures. Producing Jesuitic graduates has become the aim of modern public education, despite the heavy price of ignoring Scriptures, which, as Luther warned and the Columbine and other such murders attest, has indeed turned the public schools into a widening gates of hell. Jesuit theater and the spiritual exercises, whose original purpose was to bring human understanding into papal subservience through esoteric emotional experiences, have evolved into the full panoply of contemporary social social communication. The great objective of obscuring Scripture has operated to discourage the formal study of the basics of which the Bible is the cornerstone: literature, science, and history. Research by the National Association of Scholars of the U.S. News and World Report's annual listing of America's best colleges, including both private and public, disclosed startling figures. In 1914, nearly all these institutions had required courses in English composition. By 1965, the figure was 86%. In 1996, 36%. In 1914, 82% of the best colleges and universities had traditional mathematics requirements. By 1964, only 36% did. By 1996, 12%. In 1914, 1939, and 1964, more than 70% of the institutions required at least one course in the natural sciences. That figure fell to 34% in 1996. Literature courses were required at 75% of the institutions in 1914 and at 50% in 1939 and 1964. Today, not one of the best institutions has a literature requirement. Most colleges today are turning out graduates who have studied little or no history. I'm one of them. I am one of them. But that's changed in the last 5 years of my life. And I'll talk about that more in a minute. It says in 1914, 90% of America's elite colleges required history. In 1939 and 1964, more than 50% did. By 1996, only one of the 50 best schools offered a required history course. The day is approaching, perhaps, when the only historians will be amateurs who study history as self-help, who examine the past in order to make sense of the present and not to be caught unprepared by the future. And now, the comment that I wanted to make. The Bible clearly tells us that there is nothing new under the sun. What has gone on before will happen again. History repeats itself. That phrase has become cliche, but it represents a biblical maxim. And we can trust history as a reliable predictor of the future because history repeats itself. God promised that it would. He said so in His book. And I am one of those amateurs who grew up in an educational system that focused on history very little, and what little history I got was completely whitewashed, as I have learned through my studies in history the last 4 or 5 or 6 years. The books that I read, both on amateur radio and on Inquisition Update, remind me just how whitewashed the history that I received from the school system really was. Books by R.W. Thompson. Books by, numerous authors. Charles Chinnicky, Bill Hughes, J. Wayne Lawrence, Peter DeRosa, Malachi Martin even. The history that I got in the school system wasn't even a shadow of the truth. And that truth that they whitewashed out of the history books, I now recognize as critical to be able to understand what is happening in this country today and around the world. And that's why on Inquisition Update, I'm going to focus on that history. I'm going to read those books. It's one of the most difficult things in the world to motivate someone to read a book. And I have decided that one of the best ways to serve my listeners is to read those books on the air for your benefit and for mine. And I hope you appreciate the information that I bring to you here on Inquisition Update. And if you are a regular listener, you soon will be able to do the math. He says, America's understanding has been systematically bent to the will of the church militant, the Roman Catholic Church, while the intellectual means for sensing the capture have been disconnected. Most of the content of modern media, whether television, radio, print, film, stage, or web, is state-of-the-art Jesuit ratio studiorum. The Jesuit college is no longer just a chartered institution. It has become our entire social environment. The movies, the mall, the school, the home, the mind. Human experience has become a spiritual exercise managed by the charismatic spiritual directors who know how to manipulate a democracy's emotions. Logic, perspective, national memory, and self-discipline are purged to the point that unbridled emotional responses, as economist Thomas Sowell put it, are all we have left. Despite its ascendancy over American life, few Americans understand the term Jesuit. In our next chapter, we shall examine how this term is defined in our basic reference works. These definitions will help us to better understand the kind of character produced by Ignatian psychological technique. I'm going to continue this discussion when we come back from the break in Chapter 10 of Rulers of Evil by F. Tupper Saucy, the title of which is Definitions. We'll continue to discuss Jesuitism when we return from the break. You're listening to Inquisition Update on LibertyRadiolive.com. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Welcome back now to the second half of Inquisition Update, with reminding the listeners that Inquisition Update is heard Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Central, 11 Eastern, and re-aired at 6 p.m. Central, 7 Eastern. And you may check the schedule page and listen to the archives. Choose wisely in where you spend your tithe dollars. Is your money best spent? Is your sacrifice best spent in an ecumenical church? Or is it best spent supporting a ministry that is not afraid to tell the truth never told anywhere else? Now, Chapter 10 of the book, Rulers of Evil by F. Tupper Saucy, is entitled Definitions. Definitions. The term Jesuit was first used to describe a member of the Society of Jesus in 1559. It did not originate from within the society, but from the outsiders. Whether intended derisively or respectfully, Jesuit does appear to have been inspired. We find in the Bible, in Numbers chapter 26 and verse 44, the mention of Jesuites. These Jesuites were the progeny of Jesui, whose name in Hebrew, Yishvi, means level. The Jesuits certainly leveled the Protestant menace, speaking of the Protestant Reformation. That's right, they leveled the Protestant Reformation. What we know today as Protestantism isn't even a shadow of what it began back in 1517. He says Jesui was a great-grandson, of Abraham. His father was the Israelite tribal chieftain Asher, which means happy. In Genesis 49, verse 20, Asher's posterity is divinely prophesied, quote, to yield royal dainties, delights. Their uniquely privileged access to the minds and wills of kings has certainly enabled the Jesuits to yield copious harvests of royal delights. But in fulfilling their scriptural prophecy, the Jesuits seem to have alienated themselves from people who use the English language, and it says, this does not disappoint Ignatius Loyola. Let us hope, he says, that the society may never be left untroubled by the hostility of the world for very long, unquote. America's first indigenous dictionary was compiled by Noah Webster and published in 1828. His American Dictionary of the English Language reflects the place held by Jesuits in the opinion of a public whose senior citizens had brought forth the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Webster himself was 41 when the Constitution was ratified. Under the word Jesuit, the definition is one of the Society of Jesus, so-called, founded by Ignatius Loyola, a society remarkable for their cunning in propagating their principles. Under the definition of Jesuited, it says, conforming to the principles of the Jesuits. Jesuitess means a female Jesuit in principle. Jesuitic or Jesuitical means pertaining to the Jesuits or their principles and arts, designing, cunning, deceitful, and prevaricating. Under Jesuitically, the definition is craftily. Under Jesuitism, the definition is the arts, principles, and practices of the Jesuits. Cunning, deceitful, hypocrisy, prevarication.
Okay, hopefully I'm on the air again, as happened yesterday. I lost my connection on Skype. I hope this doesn't become a regular thing. It's very frustrating. But we were talking about the third new international dictionary by Webster, and the definition of Jesuit is a member of a religious society for men founded by St. Ignatius. Founded by St. Ignatius Loyola in 1534. One given to intrigue or equivocation, a crafty person, a casuist. Under Jesuited, it means Jesuitic. Under Jesuitic and juridical, it means of or relating to the Jesuits, Jesuitism or Jesuitry. having qualities thought to resemble those of a Jesuit, usually despairingly. Jesuitize, to act or teach in an actual or ascribed manner of a Jesuit, to indoctrinate with actual or ascribed Jesuit principles. Under Jesuitry, the definition is principles or practices ascribed to the Jesuits as the practice of mental reservation, casuistry, and equivocation. Webster's online dictionary, W.W. Webster, 1999, is particularly revealing. Here we read that Jesuit means, quote, a member of the Roman Catholic Society of Jesus founded by St. Ignatius Loyola in 1534 and devoted to missionary and educational work, unquote. And that a Jesuit is, quote, one given to intrigue or equivocation, unquote. W.W. Webster defines to intrigue as meaning to cheat, trick, plot, and scheme, and to equivocate as to use equivocal language specifically with the intent to deceive, to avoid committing oneself in what one says. Equivocal language, according to the same source, is language subject to two or more interpretations and usually used to mislead or confuse, of uncertain nature or disposition toward a person or a thing, of doubtful advantage, genuineness, or moral rectitude. The Jesuit discipline has elevated mental reservation or casuistry and equivocation to high arts. You'll not find a more hilarious defense of these arts than Blaise Pascal's classic Provincial Letters of 1657, freely available on the Internet. As a matter of fact, you can buy hard copies of that on eBay for relatively little money. The Provincial Letters by Blaise Pascal. Purportedly written to a friend, the letters report conversations Pascal is having with Jesuit casuists. The Jesuit defends his arts thusly, quote, men have arrived at such a pitch of corruption nowadays that, unable to make them come to us, we must go to them. Otherwise, they would cast us off altogether. And what is worse, they would become perfect castaways. It is to retain such characters as these that our casuists have taken under consideration the vices to which people of various conditions are most addicted, with the view of laying down maxims which, while they cannot be said to violate the truth, are so gentle that he must be a very impracticable subject indeed who is not pleased with them. The grand project of our society for the good of religion is never to repulse anyone, let him be what he may, and so avoid driving people to despair, unquote. Jesuit moral theology hardly needs a satirist. Its humor is self-contained. Consider Herman Bussenbaum, one of the Society's most venerated moral theologians. Bussenbaum literally wrote the book on self-serving logic. His celebrated Medulla Theologia Moralis, or the marrow of moral theology of 1645, enjoyed more than 200 printings and was required ethics reading in all the Jesuit colleges. A man of stout appetites, Bussenbaum constructed an equivocation to relieve himself of the obligation to eat fish on Friday. Quote, on Fridays, every good Catholic must eat only creatures that live in the water, which justifies ordering a nice roast duck, unquote. Bussenbaum demonstrated how mental reservation could enable a criminal to escape a charge of breaking and entering. Quote, Did you force the window to gain felonious entry into these premises? Asked the judge. Certainly not, replies the accused, qualifying his denial with the mental reservation, I entered through the skylight. Unquote. Father Guri, who taught moral theology at the Roman College from his book Casus Conscientiae in 1875, approved of the way an adulterous wife, having just received absolution for her sin from a priest, used mental reservation to mislead her husband. Quote, to the entreaties of her husband, she absolutely denied the fault. Quote, I've not committed it, unquote, she said, meaning adultery such as I am obliged to reveal. In other words, I've not committed an adultery. She could deny her sin as a culprit may say to a judge who does not question him legitimately, I have not committed any crime, adding mentally, in such a manner that I should reveal it. This is the opinion of St. Liguori and of many others, unquote. The St. Liguori to whom Guri refers is Alphonse Liguori, declared patron saint of confessions and moralists by Pope Pius XII. St. Liguori was not a Jesuit himself, but he was devoted to them. He facilitated adultery by means of an equivocation. Quote, an adulteress questioned by her husband may deny her guilt by declaring that she has not committed quote-unquote adultery, meaning quote-unquote idolatry, from which the term adultery is often employed in the Old Testament. You see what casuistry means? Indeed, God often used the word adultery to help us to understand what, in his view, idolatry truly is. It's a betrayal. It's an unlawful betrayal to bow down and worship a man-made thing. And remember, our God is a jealous God. He wants us to know him. He wants us to love him like a spouse. And if we fall into idolatry and place our faith, hope, and trust in a man-made image or idol, God likens that to adultery. And so this woman evades her guilt by using adultery in her statement, but with the mental reservation that adultery means idolatry. She didn't commit idolatry. Casuistry is the process of applying moral principles falsely and deciding the rights and wrongs of a case. The word casuistry comes from the word cases. W. Webster equates casuistry with rationalization, quote, to cause something to seem reasonable, to provide plausible but untrue reasons for conduct, unquote. In early 1999, President Clinton's biographer, David Moranis, could be seen remarking on talk shows that the president owed his formidable skills as a criminal defendant to his, quote, training in casuistry at Georgetown University, unquote. It reminds me of the interrogation, the videotaped interrogation of President Bill Clinton, when he said, it depends on what the meaning of the word is. I'll never forget that as long as I live. And of course, at the time, I didn't recognize it as Jesuit casuistry. But he was indeed astutely trained at Jesuit Georgetown University, and he was a master at equivocation and mental reservation. Continuing, it says, the great casuist Antonio Escobar pardoned evildoing as long as it was committed in pursuit of a lofty goal. Quote, purity of intention, he declared in 1627, may justify actions which are contrary to the moral code and to human laws, unquote. Herman Bussenbaum ratified Escobar with his own famous maxim, if the end is legal, the means are legal. Escobar and Bussenbaum boil it down to the essential doctrine of terrorism. The end justifies the means. Think about it. That's the motto of the Jesuits. The end justifies the means. If the end is laudable, then whatever means used to achieve that end is also laudable. That is the power behind terrorism. And after one reads this book, one can easily come up with another definition for Jesuitism. Terrorism. Continuing now, it says, casuistry solved the problem of usury. Although the voice of Jesus commanded, quote, lend hoping for nothing again, and your reward will be great, as in Luke chapter 6, verse 35, Jesuit lenders often charged exorbitant interest. Father Guri explained the principle, quote, if lending 100 francs, you are losing 10 francs by it, you lend really 110 francs. Then you shall receive 110 francs. So in other words, if you want to charge 10% usury or 10% interest on a loan that God said that we should loan without interest, then in order to justify charging interest, you merely equivocate in your mind that if I lend this $100 to my brother, I could have used that $100 to earn 110. I could have made $10 effectively investing my own money in goods and services or the cost of doing business. So therefore, if I lend that same $100 to my brother, then I may justly claim that I loaned him $110 and he ought to pay me back $110. Because my loaning that $100 to my friend cost me $10 in profit. So there you have the Jesuit casuist justifying charging interest despite God's law against usury. Continuing with the book, it says, indeed, casuistry has set the moral tone of world economics. In his Universae Theologia Moralis, Catholic Moral Theology, 1652 to 66, Antonio Escobar rendered the opinion that, quote, the giving of short weight is not to be reckoned as sin when the official price for certain goods is so low that the merchant would be ruined thereby, unquote. By this reasoning, the international network of central banks, beginning with the Knights Templars and sustained by the Society of Jesus, has been absolved from manipulating monetary values if doing so helps individual sovereign nation-states manage their subjects. Subjects are cyclically required to part with true value, that is, hard-earned gold and silver coinage, in exchange for intangible credit denominated in paper notes, whose official promises to repay in precious coinage are cyclically broken. As the most powerful office in Roman Catholicism, the Black Papacy might have promoted stable national economies by means of the divinely fair monetary system commanded in the Bible in Leviticus chapter 19. Listen to what it says. Ye shall do no unrighteousness in measure. Just balances, just weights, shall ye have. I am the Lord your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt. Instead, it has promoted Escobar's casuistry, which directs merchants to survive official value manipulations by cheating one another. There are significant sociological consequences when giving short weight becomes policy. A moral paradigm is set. That paradigm governs more than just commercial transactions. It affects human relationships as well. Partners in friendships, marriages, and families be giving short weight, giving less than represented. This results in one-sided, frustrating, dysfunctional emotional transactions, and ultimately an aberrant society. Isn't that what we see today? No one's word is worth the breath it takes to utter it anymore. Being shortchanged is expected in our society. Is this, as this author suggests, is this a consequence of our departure from the law of Leviticus chapter 19 having to do with just weights and measures in commerce and business? I certainly couldn't argue effectively against that thesis. He says, the ultimate beneficiary of aberrant societies, of course, is Pontifex Maximus, whose profession is their regulation. Now, here the author is proposing something that is rather new to my understanding, and we'll develop it further when we get along further in this book. But he just told us that Pontifex Maximus, the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church, his profession is the regulation of aberrant societies. Like I said, we'll develop this further when we continue in the book. But that's just a taste of where we're going to go in this book. And it's a rather new understanding for me. But we're going to make sure that we all understand his thesis and we can debate it amongst ourselves and come to our own conclusions based on the scriptures. But it's an interesting concept that he wrote just now, said. We'll return to the broadcast tomorrow on Inquisition Update. Stay tuned for Nicholas Arthur's Cross the Border.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.